Let's go ahead and get started with this tools and the parts that we're going to need. I got these two Monroe C1512s. Those are the rear 4C shocks off Rock Auto for about 170 a piece. They're out of stock currently, but they can be picked up for less than $200 a piece now, considering they used to be around $400 a piece, especially on like sites like FCP and whatnot. And these actually come with a lifetime warranty regardless, so it's actually better to just pick them up off Rock Auto. You're going to want a 10mm for the two top bolts for the mount, a 13 for the actual nut that holds the mount to the shock, an 18 for the bottom bolt. An impact will make your life so much easier, or you can use a breaker bar and a ratchet. I mean, suit yourself. My wheel bolts are 17mm, so I think the factory ones are 19. I just have a different size on mine for some reason. So yours might be 19, yours might be 17. It kind of varies depending on your wheel setup. Are up, supporting it on jack stands. Also support it with the jack, so just in case the stands fail, you have fail safe. And we'll pull the wheel off and get started. All right, once the wheel is off, you're gonna see the shock back here. You got two 10mm bolts holding in the top mount. Then you have one 18mm holding on the bottom right here. Go ahead and start on this bottom one right here. Go ahead and take your trusty impact, 18mm impact socket. Get that 18mm headed bolt out of the bottom. This next step's pretty important. You're going to want to go ahead, after removing that bottom bolt, go ahead and unclip this connector. If this shock were to fall and snag on this, you're going to be in a world of trouble. So make sure to go ahead and disconnect that now. All right, go ahead and grab your 10mm socket. Make sure it is seated really well on that. Go ahead, bring it on down. The second one, you're going to want to hold the shock itself while undoing it, because the shock is now going to fall if you don't have that held. So I'm going to put my camera down and go ahead and do that. I'm going to show you guys what a bad 4C shock looks like. This is the old one, just came off the car. I'm going to press it on down. And absolutely nothing. Does not move. Does nothing. So I know it's electronic, but you should not have to pull it back out like this. All right, new one, you can press it down and it comes back up. If you're going to reuse the mount, which mine is not bad, I'm going to reuse mine. I did buy new ones, but I'll go ahead and send them back. Rubber's fine on it. It's perfectly fine. Take your impact, grab a 13mm socket and an impact, and drive it on off there and reuse that old one. Here's the new one reassembled. This little sleeve here comes off as soon as you take off the mount. Transfer that from the old one onto the new one to protect that inner part of the shock. You can reuse a lot of this stuff. It doesn't really go bad. Let's go ahead and throw it back on the car. Line up that top part. Grab your two 10mm. Carefully put the shock in the back. Line it up. And hand thread first. Do not take an impact and try to tighten these. And two, you do not want to tighten these just yet either, because you need to line up that bottom bolt as well. So just thread these in ever so slightly on both sides by hand. They're not fully tight, so that gives us a little bit of leeway to line up that bottom 18 millimeter. Go ahead, press the shock. Line the bolt up, thread it in by hand. Never use an impact when initially trying to thread any bolt on a vehicle. After you're done tightening that 18 millimeter on the bottom, torque it to spec. Come up here, tighten the two 10 millimeters the rest of the way, torque them to spec as well. You can find the torque specs in Vida or in the description below. I should not have to relay that information if you're working on your own car. Make sure to plug the shock back in. And after this is all done, make sure you have access to Vida and do a sum module calibration. Because if you don't, this car is going to feel really weird because it's not going to know what's going on with that new shock. It's an electronic system. It needs to be calibrated afterwards on a flat surface. Go ahead, throw the wheel back on, lower the car, you're good to go. We're going to do this job properly. Hook your car up to a battery tender, preferably a 15 amp. I mean, that'll keep the car going. Put the car in ignition mode 2. Get Vida set up and started. Get your dice connected. And get ready for the SUM calibration. Go to diagnostics. Go to vehicle communication once it loads. Go to the SUM module, click on that. Go to advanced tab and hit calibration. Right from there, it's going to walk you through the instructions. All right, now take a step out of the car, make sure the ignition's on. The ignition should really be on anytime you have your dice unit hooked up. But after repairing or replacing 4C shocks, this is a necessary calibration to be done. It'll basically on flat ground calibrate to the factory specification of when this car was new. Go ahead, make sure you're out of the car, ignition on, battery, charger is hooked up, 8 to 15 amp charger. If you don't have one of those, don't bother doing this. If you don't have one of those hooked up and your battery dies during this, you will risk frying something. You're going to want to press start, and please wait. We'll show up right here. You're going to want to wait until that has disappeared and then exit. All of these should be listing okay. If you have an unsuccessful or not calibrated, it means something is either disconnected or malfunctioning.